Welcome to the Jeff Eby Show. Jeff Eby Show, where the talk is all about Dickson County.
Welcome to the show where the talk is all about Dickson County. We are coming to you live from the beautiful downtown Dickson in the historic arcade. I'm your host, Jeff Eby. Please share this video right now if you're watching on Facebook, and like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. We appreciate all the shares and all the comments. We are totally listener supported, and we need your help sharing these videos. And today we have a very special guest, and I'm really excited to introduce him. We've already been having a lot of discussions here, and it's been really neat already. Yeah. But our Representative Michael Curcio, he is actually our state rep in half of Dickson County.
That's right.
All of Hickman County.
Correct.
And a little part of Murray County.
That's right, yeah. The population-wise, about a third, but geographically it splits out differently.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's start off by just kind of giving us an overview of how you got to where you are, just a little bit of background on you.
Yeah, happy to. So my wife, of course, I grew up in Dickson County, born and raised. My family's been here. I say 3 generations. It's actually way more than that, but I don't know how to pull up the genealogy chart.
Right.
But we've had family in Dickson County pretty much since Tennessee became a state. Actually, through my dad's mother, my grandmother's grandfather fought in the War of 1812 with General Jackson from Yellow Creek.
Wow.
And so a lot of history in the county. This is definitely my home. But I grew up like a lot of folks. I went away to school. I was gone for about 10 years. And my wife and I, after we got married, we'd been married about a year. She shot up in bed one morning and said, I want to go back home. And what she meant by that was back to the South. She's from Arkansas. I'm from here. And a lot of her family had left Arkansas, central Arkansas, and said, I want to go back to Dickson. It feels a lot like the hometown that I grew up in. And I said, absolutely. Obviously I loved that plan. Right. So no argument out of me. So we came home. That's, that was 2009. And because we'll be married 13 years on July 3rd. Wow. So it's easy for me to remember my anniversary because it's right before Independence Day.
Right.
So can't ever forget that one.
That is an easy one.
Yeah. So came home, actually opened a restaurant. My wife and I opened a restaurant on Main Street called Ace Diner many moons ago.
Yes, I remember that. Ate there many times.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And then we sold it after about 3 years. I think we were some of the few people.
Actually, I missed that.
Well,
I wish it was still there.
I missed the people. We sort of built the restaurant that we wanted to hang out in.
Right.
Which, of course, meant we never could hang out there because we were always working.
Exactly.
But, and that wasn't my full-time gig either. I'm in the insurance business like yourself, but we do mostly employee benefits. I work for Benefits, Inc. here in Dickson. Just a quick plug there, where we do employee benefits and HR consulting. And then my wife is a public school teacher. She teaches elementary art at Centennial Elementary, which is also where our 3 children go to school. So we're Dickson County through and through. I was actually recruited to run for the 69th district seat, which is the seat that I hold for the first time in 2014. That was the first election that I ran in. I ran against the incumbent who'd been there many, many years, David Shepard, who's a dear friend and unfortunately passed away not too long ago. But the structure of the state had changed. We used to be a supermajority Democratic state, very old school kind of conservative Democrat, but Democrat nonetheless. Well, you had this groundswell, this seismic shift in state politics. About 10 years, over the past 15 years now. And so we were to the point to where we needed a seat at the table. We needed a leadership person at the table working with Republican governor, Republican supermajorities in the General Assembly. And so I was asked to run for that seat. I did. Unfortunately, I lost my first time out, although I think that was the best thing that could ever happen to me because it taught me how to work really hard on a campaign, and there's only 2 ways to run, which is either unopposed or scared.
Yes, I know.
So
I know the feeling.
Yeah, so I lost that first race it was 2014, I lost by 15 votes.
I remember that. Yeah.
Very, very tight race. But we came right back at it and said, you know what? The fact that it was that close means that people are ready for a change. Right. So I ran again in 2016, which was the year I was elected. I had a 3-way Republican primary. David decided to retire. And then I did have a Democrat opponent in the general, but I won with just just about 70% of the vote, both in the Republican primary and in the general election, and we've enjoyed those margins ever since. So they've actually ticked up a little bit each year, which is humbling, and I appreciate the support. So that's kind of how I got here. Again, being in the General Assembly, a lot of people don't realize, is not a full-time job.
Right.
We're citizen legislators, which I think makes us better legislators.
No doubt.
That means I've got to commute to Nashville, during legislative session, get my legislative business done, and then come home and be a father, be a husband, and also be, an employee and a professional all at the same time. So we have to live and work under the very same laws that we're passing every single day. And I think that is one of the things that really separates us from the federal government. We also have a single subject caption rule, which when I say that, people kind of gloss over. But what that means is that at the state legislature, we can't pass these giant omnibus bills like they pass at the federal level where, say, well, you got to vote for it because even though it's got 10 things in there you hate, it's got 500 things in there that you love. In the state of Tennessee, a long bill is 5 pages, 10 pages. Maybe you'll get a 50-page bill here and there if it's really, really complicated. But it's because it's got to be on one subject. You can't mix and match. So you're voting on these issues up or down on their own merits and not because, well, it's got this sweetener in here that I like, even though I hate everything else. The other thing we've got to do at the state level that I think separates us from the feds is we constitutionally have to pass a balanced budget. So we are a pay-as-we-go state in Tennessee. We're the lowest tax state in the nation, the lowest debt state in the nation. We pay cash for our roads through a dedicated road funding program where we pay at the pump through the gas tax. And that means that we tax everybody based on their consumption. So whether you're a tourist and you're coming to you're driving from Minnesota down to Florida and you cross over Tennessee, every time you gas up, you're paying for that road that you're using. If you're living here, if you're here on vacation, if you're staying at an Airbnb, or if you're just here, visiting, and you buy groceries, you purchase other things, you buy tennis shoes at Walmart, you are helping pay the bills for the state of Tennessee. So we're a sales tax driven state, and because of that, we're on very, very strong fiscal footing. We got $1.5 billion in our rainy day fund, which is incredible. We're the best funded pension plan anywhere in the nation, and nobody else can boast these things. So Tennessee is on solid financial footing, and I think it's because of that citizen legislator model. We don't pay these guys and gals very much. I make about $18,000 a year being in the General Assembly, so it's not something that you do as a full-time career.
Right.
But it's something that you do because you want to serve your state.
Yeah, and I think that's why people are moving to Tennessee, just for that the tax base.
Yes.
The friendliness of Tennessee, and just the overall ease of doing business in Tennessee.
I agree, and I told this story. Actually, I was on another radio program earlier in the week, but I'll tell it again. My wife and I we took our children to the beach last week, and so it is, you down there, you meet people from all over, and we met another couple. Their kids were the exact same age as ours. We became fast friends hanging out. They live in Illinois, and in a 20-minute conversation on the beach, after talking about kind of what's going on in Illinois, and they were sort of asking me questions about Tennessee, they literally that night went and got on their computers and were looking for houses in and around Nashville and Dixon County. And to think that some states have oppressed their citizens so much that a 20-minute conversation with a perfect stranger on the beach could make somebody say, you know what, I want to go to Tennessee. Number one, it's sad. It's sad commentary on Illinois or wherever they're coming from, but it makes me very proud of my state, and I hope that we can remember what got us to this position.
Right.
Because I'm all about people moving in. I love having new friends and neighbors from all parts of the country. But I always tell them, don't forget why you came here.
Right.
Don't forget the policies that chased you off to begin with.
Exactly.
And again, I link all that back to our fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, I being in the military in the past, and I ran across a lot of people from a lot of places around in the country, and I was just really surprised. And I'm sure some people realize this, but like the property tax, just the property tax alone in some of these areas, I mean, we're talking $10,000, $12,000 a year.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that's the norm up there.
Well, this couple we were talking to said that very thing. They said, look, we've almost got our house paid off, but even then, when it's paid off, we're still going to owe $15,000 a year in taxes.
It's just incredible.
And yet they've got debt on their roads. They've got debt as a state. In other words, I would almost be okay paying that higher tax rate if the state were in good financial footing, but it's not.
Right.
And so what that tells you is you don't need those onerous tax rates to be able to have good performance. You've got to have fiscal responsibility. You've got to have, and I quote my old 4-H teacher, Janet Cluck, when I say this, but in Tennessee, we say no to a lot of really good ideas so that we can say yes to some really great ideas.
Exactly.
And that's all it takes is discipline. It's the way you run your house. It's the way I've got to run my household. Sure, would we love to be on vacation all the time or, buy a boat or do – everybody would love all those nice things, but you pick and you choose. And sometimes you spend money recreationally, and other months you say, you know what, we're doing good just to pay the light bill and put food on the table.
Right.
And you've got to make those sacrifices. Money doesn't grow on trees, and I'm really proud that Tennessee it strictly adheres to that fiscal responsibility. Very, very few. In fact, I think there's only a couple of states who even can say they pay cash for their roads. So we have no road debt at all. But we are certainly one of the few that has a AAA credit bond rating with Mitch and Moody's and Fitch. Yeah. So when we go to New York every summer for those meetings, I say we, I don't go, but when the comptroller and the treasurer and the governor goes, when Tennessee comes there, it's like, okay, here are the guys that are doing it right. And I'm so proud of that.
Yes.
That makes me feel like I won't be here forever. When you walk through the halls of the Tennessee General Assembly, you'll see composite photographs of all the folks who used to serve. And what I tell new members when they come in is I say, when you walk down that hallway, did you recognize a lot of people on the wall? And they'll say, well, no, I didn't. I said, well, me neither.
Right.
And I said, and a couple of years after I'm gone, nobody's going to recognize me either.
Yeah.
So let's just do our job well while we're here. Let's check the political grandstanding at the door. Remember, you're here as an elected, basically, you're on the board of directors of the state of Tennessee, and you've got a finite amount of time to make sure that under your watch things continued, as well as they are. So that's something that I don't take lightly and something I'm really proud to get to do.
Let me ask you, speaking of roads, is there any possibility of getting you may have talked about this or not, but 3 lanes from Nashville to Dixon?
I think it's certainly always a possibility. And if you've noticed, they've gone ahead and widened the bridges. Right. They've kind of made room for that.
I thought when they were doing it, here it comes.
Here it comes, yeah. And we've got that truck lane now as you go up the hill between 172.
Right.
But I don't. The short answer is I don't know that 4 lanes is on the list or 3 lanes is on the list necessarily. But I do know that the infrastructure is there to do it. So, right. It's kind of one project at a time. There's a big backlog of projects that we're still working through. One of the things that's actually the engineering is done on now, which I'm really proud to have spearheaded and championed, is widening 46 from the 172 exit to Highway 100. So going through that Bon Aqua area. Right now it's 2 lanes with a turn in the middle. It's really not enough.
Right.
It'll be a true 4 lane when they get done with that. That whole corridor there, if you think about that triangle between 172 exit, Highway 100, and then Fairview, that whole area there is about to just explode.
Yes.
I know there have been talks about maybe putting another healthcare facility there. They've been, looking at maybe a wastewater treatment plant there so that you can get more neighborhoods and more infrastructure. So growth is definitely coming this way out of Nashville. Because if you think about it, folks want to move to Nashville, the IT city.
Yes.
They look at real estate and they say, well, I can't afford Nashville, so what's this little town north? Well, I can't afford that either. And they go east, and then they go south to Franklin, and they go, I definitely can't afford that. And then they wind up landing in Dixon because you can still get a nice home, a little bit of property. Although the prices are higher than they were even 3 or 4 years ago, but it's not Franklin prices or Nashville prices.
And finding a home in Dixon is a little difficult right now. Also,
we just had my mother-in-law's home on the market, and our realtor prepared us. He said, get ready. He said, you're probably going to sell this thing in less than 24 hours, and it's probably going to be somebody from California sight unseen. And he was exactly right. That's exactly what happened. So,
all right, we're going to go to break really quick, and we'll be back right here in just a few minutes with Representative Michael Curcio.
You've spent years dreaming up your business plan, saving every dollar, searching for the right location, and perfecting your product. Auto Owners insures your small business, because it isn't small to you.
Only 36 more to go.
That's simple human sense.
Ask Eby Insurance in Dixon if auto owners make sense for you.
All right, we are back with Representative Michael Curcio, and we're going to just kind of continue our discussion here. Let's talk a little bit about the structure of the government and a little kind of a civics lesson for people who are unfamiliar with that.
Absolutely, I do this. When I go to talk to a high school class or something. I play this little game with them. I'll do this exercise. I'll get on the whiteboard and I'll say, okay, who can tell me who the president is? And of course, almost everybody can, so I write that name on the board. What about the vice president? 70% of them. Okay, write that down. Then I'll go over to the other branch of government. I'll say, okay, the judiciary. Tell me about the Supreme Court. They might know how many members. They don't know too many names.
Right.
Kind of falls off. Then I talk about the legislative branch. Who's your congressman? Who are your two senators? It's hit or miss. And then I go all the way down the chart till I get to county commission, city council, and it falls off pretty quick, as you can imagine.
Yes.
So at the end of that exercise, I'll say, now here's the irony. I said, you probably hear your parents and other adults in your life very, very concerned about what the president said today, about what's going on in the Congress. I said, but the irony is it's the people at the bottom of this chart who are oftentimes unpaid volunteers who impact your life every single day. The president has very little to do with what happens in your life. The Congress has very little to do with what happens in your life. Yes, they pass laws on big hot-button kind of socially oriented issues, but here in small-town America, we can pretty well run our lives the way we want to run our lives, regardless of what's going on in some faraway city like Washington. The kind of family structures and social mores are largely the same in small-town America as they were years and years ago, despite where the federal government has tried to take us. But the people who impact your life, people who make sure you have clean drinking water, going through the pandemic, we learned this, right? People who decide whether or not your kids can go to school, whether or not they've got to wear a mask, whether or not all of these things, those are decided at the local level. And so one of the things that I hope is the legacy out of the COVID-19 pandemic is that maybe you'll see people start to go back to county commission meetings and pay attention to what's going on. I think our school board members do a great job, but one of the things I always point out is, hey, I can't throw any stones at what any of these local officials are doing, but if you notice, when was the last time you had a hotly contested local race like that?
Right.
It's usually when there's a vacancy, somebody retires, somebody, heaven forbid, somebody passes away, that kind of thing. And so I hope that folks start to pay attention again to what's going on locally. And that's why I'm so happy that you have this show, is because we've lost so many of our local media outlets that people don't know what's happening in the county courthouse or in the city council. So just a brief sidebar there. But the structure of state government mirrors largely the federal government. So we have a chief executive, the governor, basically, the equivalent to the president.
Right.
We've got a judiciary, a Supreme Court, and a judiciary structure. I think you said you're going to have a couple judges on here in a couple of weeks.
Right.
I'm going to tune in for those.
Yeah.
And then the legislative branch. So a House and a Senate, bicameral legislature. The Senate has 33 members. They've got much larger districts. So we're in Kerry Roberts' district. I think you had Senator Roberts on.
He's coming on next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Senator Roberts represents our district, but he's got a 5-county district.
Right.
Does
he go to Hickman County too?
He does go to Hickman County, yes. So then in the in the House, there's 99 of us. Now it's confusing because there's 95 counties in Tennessee. People, well, how does that work? Well, they're supposed to be apportioned equally, and we're going to talk about redistricting in a moment. But they're rough math, 6.8 million Tennesseans. You divide that number by 99, and then you figure out, okay, there's roughly 68,000 people that would fit in a district. And then you start drawing these lines. And again, we'll talk about redistricting in a moment. So, but my district represents the western half of Dickson County, all of Hickman County, and then a portion of Murray County that actually goes into the courthouse square in Columbia. So kind of a long, stretched out district. If I drive from Cheatham Dam to downtown Columbia, I'm virtually 2 hours,
Right.
And on election day, I will drive every precinct in my district just to kind of.
It takes a while.
It's all day long.
Yes.
It is. So it's a big district, and it's predominantly rural, but it's got a lot of suburban areas as well. And so what we do is we pass the laws for the state of Tennessee. Primarily, our jurisdiction, what we deal with at the states, our largest budget items are education, healthcare, transportation, and prisons and public safety. Those are the things that we really do. Everything else is relegated pretty much to the federal government. So we'll get a lot of questions about, well, what's going on with, these migrant workers that are coming through, or what's going on with the refugee resettlement situation. I'll say, I'm very concerned about that. It's a very important issue. Unfortunately, the state has no role in that. What we do is we educate children, We provide health care for folks who can't afford it. We build roads and bridges, and then we take care of public safety. Then inside that General Assembly, we have a Speaker of the House. We elect that person out from our body, so we say, hey, we want you to lead the House. And then that Speaker is responsible then for setting up a committee structure. We have a committee structure because with 99 representatives, we could, if we wanted to suspend our rules, just come in January, everybody file as many bills as they want to, and we just stay on the House floor and argue for 9 months.
Yeah, that would take a while.
It's not very efficient.
Yes.
It'd be a real waste of taxpayer money.
Right.
So instead what we do is we have these standing committees on different subject matters. I happen to be the chairman of what's now called the Criminal Justice Committee. I used to be the chairman of what was called the Judiciary Committee. That handled everything from, cops to judges to prisons to, everything in between, civil law. Very, very broad committee subject matter, 4 subcommittees underneath it. Mary Littleton, my counterpart from Dixon, she chaired one of the subcommittees on children and family issues. And we had a restructure last year, so that Judiciary Committee was just so big, we made the strategic decision to break it up. So I chair now what's called the Criminal Justice Committee, and I have a subcommittee under me, and then there's a separate standing committee for civil. So we kind of separated the civil and the criminal. And so we pass laws dealing predominantly with public safety in Tennessee, and that's where I spend most of my time. And again, as I told you, being citizen legislators, not everybody in the General Assembly has a law degree. In fact, a minority of people in the General Assembly have a law degree. I come from an insurance background, a small business background, several doctors that are in the General Assembly, insurance agents, real estate brokers, real estate developers. So we all come from kind of normal walks of life. We come to Nashville for 3 or 4 months in the beginning of the year, and we try to make decisions the way you would make them if you were there. And that's what I tell folks is, when there's a contentious bill that comes up, you may disagree with how I voted. Even if you voted for me, we're not always going to agree. And,
Right.
and they'll say, Michael, why did you do that? That's not why I sent you there. And I'll say, and I'll explain my position. I'll explain the information that I was presented with. And I'll say, we're tasked with making the best possible decision we can with a set of facts that
Right.
we've been given. Now,
And a lot of times people don't understand. They don't have that knowledge that that you have that makes you decide what to do like that.
and because they don't have the benefit
Background.
of 9 committee hearings on
Right.
that subject where we heard from witnesses and folks from all sides. And so that's what I try to do is, especially in the off season, is be visible, be out, be at those Rotary meetings and Chamber of Commerce and things, and explain what we did. And so that way I can say, look, even if you would have made a different decision if you were in my shoes, at least you know why I did it. Right. I didn't just shoot up in bed and say, oh, well, I don't really care, so I'm going to vote this way. It was well thought out. Now, you may have made a different decision, but I didn't come to it lightly.
Right.
And so serving has been an incredible honor because you meet folks from every corner of the state. I now know a handful of people in each county, which is, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is.
And my wife and I, we've got 3 small children under the age of 10. We're doing a 95 county courthouse tour where we'll drive to the county, we'll go to the court, and we take a family picture in front of the courthouse. And now we started it a couple of years ago. It takes a while, you're not going to knock them all out in one afternoon. And now every time we go to another county, I know more and more people there. Right. And 10 years ago, I didn't know anybody in Fentress County, kind of thing. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the redistricting.
Okay.
Currently, at the federal level, Dixon falls under with the Nashville,
the 5th district,
right?
Congressional district. That's right.
Now, with this redistricting, I understand. The census for Dixon County is up quite a bit.
It is. And for Tennessee generally.
Right.
We didn't grow as much as Florida and Texas, but we're getting a lot of growth, and it's all coming from California, New Jersey, higher tax, higher regulation states. But yes, so the way that process works, every 10 years there's a census. The feds first release the statewide number. That's the easiest one to come up with because they don't have to anonymize a lot of the data because it's so statewide.
Right.
You get into these really rural parts, and you actually can identify and kind of violate people's privacy. So they'll sometimes they'll have to move somebody from kind of this hilltop to this hilltop so that you can't try. So there's little stuff like that just takes a while when you get down to the micro level. But the statewide number comes out pretty quick. Tennessee grew, and most of that growth is in Middle Tennessee. Now the interesting thing is, Middle Tennessee is growing as fast as, unfortunately, West Tennessee is shrinking. And there are some places in kind of middle eastern Tennessee that are also shrinking. Folks are coming towards the middle. They're gravitating more towards those bigger cities, and especially Nashville.
Right.
So when we go to reapportion and we take that total number again and we divide it by 99, those district lines are going to change. West Tennessee's probably going to lose a seat or two. Middle Tennessee's going to gain a seat or two. So in Middle Tennessee at the congressional level, you may get Jim Cooper, who's our congressman, a Democrat from Nashville. His district is going to shrink because there's more population density there now. You may get another Nashville district as well. Right now, he's got the whole thing to himself. I think you could probably see a West Nashville, maybe Bellevue type, more of a Republican district, a little more of a suburban district as opposed to East Nashville downtown, where you've got more of that urban and certainly more liberal and left-leaning Democratic vote there. You've even seen one or two more like Bernie Sanders, AOC type candidates sort of start to bubble up out of East Nashville. Very, very different than your traditional conservative Democrat that you might see in other neighborhoods in Nashville, right? So you could see there are two different districts. I don't see it coming as far west as Dixon, but we don't know until we get that county level population data. So we will most likely wind up in the district occupied by Mark Green, who I think is coming on your show.
Yes.
He currently now has every county around us. So he's north of us in Montgomery County, and then he comes around us, Houston, Humphreys, Hickman, goes on into Williams, and it just does this curve around Dixon. I think the most logical thing is that Dixon will become part of his. Nashville districts get smaller, West Tennessee districts get bigger.
Right. So, now the y'all at the General Assembly level, you're the ones that handles all the redistricting.
That's right. We draw those lines. So that's why it matters who governs, right?
Exactly.
So everybody focuses on federal politics. State politics matter because it's the majority party in the General Assembly at the state level that goes through that redistricting process. Now, we have a very strong tradition of bipartisanship in Tennessee. There will be Republicans and Democrats on that redistricting committee. We have also not been sued over our redistricting the way some other states have. We try to do it fairly and honestly because in Tennessee, what we say is, look, I want to win because we have better ideas, not because we got better tricks, right? So, yes, we have Republican supermajorities, but that is a reflection of the mood of the state. We just saw a recent round of polling that came out. Bill Lee enjoys very, very high Republican support and even support among Democrats. Folks are happy with the way the state is run. So we're going to go about this process free and fairly and redraw those lines in a way that's reflective of the voters of those districts. The county level data will probably hit our desks September, October, and then we are obligated by law to get that turned back around and draw those new districts mid-January.
Yes, because we got an election coming up in 22.
That's right. That's right. So like myself, I run every 2 years, and back to that structure of the state government, every 24 months I'm up for re-election. So people talk about term limits. I say, look, I'm running every 2 years. So, you've got your opportunity every other year to decide who you want to represent you. Our state senators, Kerry Roberts, he's up every 4 years. So the Senate, they half the Senate runs for re-election every 2 years, but they're on 4-year terms. Our governor, just like the president, is locked into no more than 2 4-year terms. It's different in every state, but the Tennessee system most closely mirrors the federal government.
All right, we're going to go to a break real quick, and we'll be back here in just a minute with our discussion with Representative Michael Curcio.
You've dreamed about the perfect house, a place to call your own, and a place to not only stretch out, but to grow. Auto Owners protects your house because to you, it's home. That's simple human sense.
Ask Eby Insurance in Dixon if auto owners make sense for you.
Happy to help, man. I was just over there talking to myself anyway.
Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with Representative Michael Curcio, and we were talking about this redistricting right before we went to break. So your district may change a little bit, right?
It could. So again, we won't know until we see the data, but Murray County has grown exponentially. So right now I have a small, it's kind of a weird pizza wedge that goes in through Hampshire and Williamsport, if you know where those places are. But it triangulates right on the square in Columbia. So Murray County has grown so much, they will no longer be able to sustain the 2 rep structure they have. They'll probably have 3 because that population's gotten so dense. So I will probably lose ground in Murray County, but then the growth in Dixon and probably even East Hickman may offset some of that. So I don't know that it'll be a wholesale like sweeping change. I don't think I'm going to wind up in like a brand new county, although who knows. But I think it'll be more just the lines kind of morphing a little bit.
What do you think? You'll take in more of Dixon County or not?
I don't think so, because since Dixon has grown, I think Mary and I will both just sort of be able to sort of swell in Dixon a little bit, and that'll allow me to sort of maybe take off some of that Murray bit. Although who knows? I mean, I and I'll be honest, we don't get a ton of say in that on the front end. Now, once we kind of get down to the granular level, we can help move some lines and say, well, that even though that makes sense on a map culturally. Those people don't know me, I don't know them, and that really makes more sense in this other district, or that kind of thing. So that kind of horse trading starts. In fact, right when the show started, I missed a call from our legal counsel in the House, who's responsible for drawing the line. So he may have some updated census data for me. I don't know. So he left me a voicemail. We'll see.
Right. So we're in the call-in portion of our show right now, and I think do we have a caller? Okay. Yeah, just call in, and if you have a question for Representative Michael Curcio, just please call in, and we'll take your call and go from there. So let's talk a little bit about some of the bills that you sponsored.
Absolutely. So generally this year, I'll kind of do a brief overview. I'll talk about some things that I worked on. But we went through education reform in Tennessee this year. We actually had a special session on education early in January, and it had a lot to do with the pandemic itself. No one was more affected by COVID-19 than our K-12 population because it disrupted their lives so much. It totally upended the way school works, the way teaching works. Remote learning became a thing. I am so proud of the way Dixon County managed that. We stayed in school. My kids were in school almost the whole time. There were a few bumps in the road, obviously, and we made it through. Again, these parents that I met from Illinois, friends of mine even in Nashville, their kids have still not been in school.
It's incredible.
They've lost a year and a half of their lives. And I'm so proud that we were able to persevere, put one foot in front of the other, and get our kids in school. And I cannot thank Dr. Weeks, the school board, educators, administrators enough, and parents. I mean, people were just, doing all they could, pulling out the stops to make sure their kids could have as normal a structure as possible. So education, and a huge emphasis this year. We put $184 million appropriation in for teacher pay raises. We're asking these folks to do an awful lot, and we want to make sure that they're properly compensated. So now the base, starting salary in Tennessee for teachers creeping up there, that $40,000 a year mark, which, nurses, cops, teachers, you can't ever, there's no amount of money you can pay them enough, but at least we can feel like we're paying them hopefully closer to what they're worth and more of a competitive salary. So that was a huge push starting out. We underwent criminal justice reform this year, and that included truth in sentencing to really balance the scales of justice. We spend $1.5 billion a year in Tennessee incarcerating about 30,000 Tennesseans. That would be okay if we were getting a good return on that investment. The problem is we're not. We've got about a 50% recidivism rate in this state. That means half the people who leave prison are coming back within 5 years, and it's madness. We're doing something wrong. So that, what's the definition of insanity? Keep doing the same thing over and over again, expect different results. So what I've been on a crusade with, and I've been working very closely with our governor, Bill Lee, is this concept of separating who we're mad at versus who we're afraid of. And, from working and around being a constable, there are a lot of knuckleheads out there who do stupid things. And yes, they need to be reprimanded for that. But do they need a 6 or a 10-year prison sentence?
No.
And oftentimes our structure, our criminal code is set to really throw the book at folks who actually have mental health and substance abuse issues. And if we could divert them, get them into a program, a treatment, drug court, family court. We now have in Dixon one of the only safe baby courts in Tennessee.
Yeah, we're proud of that.
Absolutely. And that's through the leadership of the county commission and our judicial system that's made possible, because you've decided that's where our money needs to be put, right? Because we know that it works. When I say the only problem with drug court is we don't have enough of them.
Right.
And so separating who we're mad at versus who we're afraid of. We had two bills that I was proud to sponsor this year. One was the Alternatives to Incarceration bill, which said, okay, if you've got a mental health drug problem, if we throw you in county jail 6 months later, you're still going to have a mental health or a drug problem. Jailers are not mental health professionals. They're law enforcement professionals. We're asking them to do a different job than what they're trained to do. So diverting those folks is a big thing. Until they've crossed the line, unfortunately, and done something criminally, then they're going to go into our incarceration system. So the companion bill to this was the Reentry Success Act. 95% of Tennesseans who are incarcerated are getting out. Only 5% of them have done something that warranted a lifetime sentence. So that means a judge and a jury of their peers decided, yes, you screwed up, but someday you can go back into society. So who they are when they come back into society has as much to do with their own desire to get better as it does the programming that we allow them to participate in. Things like educational opportunities, work programs where they can make true wages. Most prison jobs pay literally 19 or 20 cents an hour. They're pushing a broom, they're cleaning a toilet. But we've been able to do some incredible things, some pilot programs in Tennessee, allowing folks who, because they've earned it through good behavior, they're participating in the mental health programming we ask them to do, then they're allowed to apply for jobs, real jobs, while incarcerated, making true minimum wage. Some of these guys are doing piecework. I've seen guys making $10, $15, $20 an hour. What are they doing with that money? Well, they pay back the state for their room and board, so they're not costing us, the taxpayer, money to be there.
Right.
They pay their fines and fees into the victims fund. So the prosecutors, the DAs love this, right? Because they see victims all day long who never get paid.
Right.
These guys are paying their fines and fees. And then after that, we put a mandatory 10% savings rate on them. So whether they want to or not, that money's going into a trust account with their name on it. So what happens then? You spend 10 years in prison. For something you did, you're paying your debt to society. Now your victims' fines and fees are paid up. You've paid the state for your room and board. You may have $10,000, $12,000 in a savings account, and you've got a trade, you've got a skill. So when you get out, got a little money in your pocket, and you can go right to work, so that you're not desperate with nowhere to go, and then heaven forbid return to a life of crime. You might. What I say is, and it's a little crude maybe, but I don't want them to have to rob a liquor store to make rent, right? And so if they come out with a skill, a little bit of money in their pocket, then they're less likely to recidivate. And the guys that we see coming through those programs now, recidivism rate in the single digits.
Wow.
Statewide, you're talking 50%. So that tells us we're on to something there.
Sure,
So doing more of that.
Let's go to a caller. We got a caller on right now. Caller, are you there?
Hey, yeah, I'm here. This is Michael. How are you?
Hey, good. What's your question?
For Mr. Curcio, I'm listening here about the drug courts and actions and stuff like that. Hold on, let me turn my Facebook off here. There we go. And I know that Governor Lee just signed in the Senate Bill 118 as well, too, so I'm going to kind of spin off of that. In regards to the drug courts and the punishments and all that for marijuana that I guess is not obviously legal in the state of Tennessee as it is, and I guess in about 14 other states, do you see that this Senate Bill 118 is going to kind of be a springboard to kind of get on board with these other states that have completely decriminalized it, and would that slow traffic down in these drug courts, and that maybe you could kind of press a little harder on the hardcore, actually more damaging type drugs and the offenders for that?
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks for the question. Senate Bill 118 and the companion bill in the House is House Bill 490. It's a bill that actually worked on personally with Dr. Brian Terry, who helped carry that in the House. And what we wanted to do was set up a structure where patients could have access to medical cannabis, something that I've been a proud supporter of from day one. So what this bill, unfortunately, we didn't get everything that we wanted, but what we did was the bill, as amended and as signed into law, creates a cannabis commission that can study how we would structure a true medical marijuana system in Tennessee. And at the same time, what it does is it takes several named conditions and says that if you go to another state that is a legal medical cannabis state and you get prescription medical marijuana from that state and you have it in Tennessee, it decriminalizes that act. So you would not be guilty of simple possession or something like that. Now, don't everybody run out and go do that. It's certain very, very limited named conditions. It's seizures, epilepsy, sickle cell anemia, things like that. So again, please don't mishear me and everybody go rush out to Arkansas and come back home with some marijuana. But so it expanded what we call that safe harbor language. Now I'm a big Paul Harvey fan. Let's talk about the rest of the story. I think what Michael's really onto here is what's the future of this in Tennessee. We have been given indication, law enforcement has been given an indication in Tennessee that the Biden administration and at the federal level, the Congress, will likely look at the federal scheduling of marijuana. Right now, marijuana is a Schedule I drug federally. By the way, it's not a Schedule I drug according to the state of Tennessee. That's just a federal designation. We see that it's not, a harmful, like a Schedule I drug, the way the feds have defined it, but that's the way it's been basically since the Nixon administration. Right. So the indication we've gotten is that the feds are going to loosen that up. The reason we haven't jumped into this pool sooner is because I feel like we're being disingenuous to our citizens. People say, oh, marijuana is legal in Colorado. It's legal in California. It's legal in Arkansas, Mississippi. It's not. That's an incorrect term. They have decriminalized it. They've decided not to prosecute marijuana crimes. It is still, however, counter to federal law. You still cannot deposit proceeds from a marijuana sale into an FDIC-insured bank. You are still subject to prosecution by the federal government. Now, the feds have not been prosecuting folks in those states, but they certainly could. So what we've asked our federal counterparts to do is say, look, you clean up your house, and we're ready to go. So I think Tennesseans are very, very receptive to the medical cannabis conversation, something that I've certainly been a proponent of since I've been in the General Assembly. On the recreational side, I think you'll see a much more vigorous debate probably in the General Assembly. Right. Many states have done this through ballot initiatives. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think we need to shirk our responsibilities and say, well, let's just put it on the ballot, let people decide. If I think that's a good thing for Tennessee, then I need to be willing to put my name on it. That's the way we've always done things in Tennessee. Is we ask our state legislators to do a tough job, but you're elected for a reason. Exactly. So I do see us moving down that road, certainly in the medical cannabis field. But if the federal scheduling changes this fall as we anticipate, look for medical cannabis legislation in January. Look for recreational cannabis legislation in January as well. Now, what the fate of those bills will be, I don't know. But I think once the feds act, then there's going to be a lot of activity at the state level.
Yeah, do you think the medical marijuana, it's going to be an easier sell, I would think, right?
It is. And again, medical marijuana means something different. You ask 10 people what they think medical marijuana is, you're getting 11 answers, right? So you're talking about oils and tinctures and things that are, easily quantifiable. So you talk about a certain number of milligrams, that's the kind of thing. Certain types, strains of the plant, that do different things. Versus some people, when you say, well, okay, well, you want medical marijuana, what do you mean? They say, well, I just want to be able to smoke as much as I want, as often as I want, until I feel the way I want, right? So there are varying definitions. I see us going more of a structured route in Tennessee. Again, part of the holdup there is that because it's a Schedule I at the federal level, the FDA is not able to study this plant. And so you can't do drug trials and vaccine trials and studies on things like. So we're relying upon data from other countries, which is good. We look at data from Israel oftentimes in the UK. But I do see this opening up a tremendous amount going into the fall and into next year.
Do you think if that does pass, that we'll have like pop-up like medical marijuana pharmacies or whatever?
It'll depend on how the state structures it, and that's part of what this cannabis commission is being convened to talk about, which is I would prefer if it's truly medicine, then it needs to go through our pharmacies. Right. I mean, so I don't go to the gas station to buy Lipitor. Right. I get that from my pharmacist, right? So if we're talking about medical cannabis, it needs to be able to be vended from a pharmacy. Right now, that's counter to federal law. If your pharmacist vended out to you medical marijuana, they would go to they would lose their license. They can't do that. Right. So
and it would be safer that way too.
Absolutely, it would, because again, if we're talking about medicine, we need to treat it like medicine. Now, if we're talking about recreation, the way we talk about alcohol, that's a totally different thing.
Right.
But that's a different debate, a different conversation. If we're talking about medical cannabis, I would prefer to see it come through a pharmaceutical system.
Right. All right, we're going to go to our last break here. We'll be right back. Just the call lines remain open. If you want to have a question for Representative Curcio, please call in and we'll take your question. We'll be back here in just a minute.
Looking for someone to trust with your insurance? Everyone wants to keep a secure future for their loved ones in case of emergency. Eby Insurance. As an independent agent, we represent many insurance companies. Our role is to serve as a trusted advisor. We will consult with you to help you understand your needs before recommending the best combination of coverage, service, and value for your unique situation. We offer insurance services ranging from auto insurance, home insurance, business insurance, and life insurance as well. Isn't that amazing? We minimize the risk for your family now and in the future as well. We've got everything you need. For more details, visit www.ebinsurance.com.
We are back. We're so happy you are sharing this with us. We're here talking with Representative Michael Curcio. And this is our last segment. Let's just kind of talk about maybe some of the bills that you think may be coming up, and maybe some of the ones you're going to be sponsoring or whatever.
Sure. One thing that I'm really proud of, I didn't talk about before, so if I can briefly, when I was first elected, we had a lot of debate at the city level about transitional living facilities and sober living homes. This year I was proud to pass a statewide bill called the SAFE Act, which really brought Tennessee into a new category statewide of having some of the best, most reputable recovery homes and sober living homes for folks. So we're talking about cannabis in the last section. I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment just to do a little victory lap there on that bill that really brought Tennessee into the 21st century when it comes to recovery, because we want folks to get access to recovery and treatment and get better so that they can go back and raise their own children, pay taxes, be normal, productive members of society. So very proud that we're able to do that in Tennessee. So I just wanted to give that quick plug. Moving forward, again, on the topic of criminal justice reform, we will probably see some truth in sentencing legislation next year. Anybody who's ever interacted with the judicial system knows that our adult sentencing matrix is obtuse and confusing, and some would say for a reason. In the late 80s, Tennessee was under federal pressure, and we were going to go under conservatorship because of our overcrowding problem in our prisons. We had to restructure our sentencing program. We had members of the General Assembly who were afraid of looking soft on crime. So what did they do? They did what government does best. They mucked it up, okay?
Right, exactly.
So they created a bunch of really long sentences on paper, but they made this structure where it's this offense at so many years at 20% or 15% or 13%. And oh, by the way, there's a parole system where you can come up for parole, and if you meet certain criteria, and you could get out early, or if you're not meeting that criteria, you've got to stay longer. This creates a complete unmitigated mess for victims, for offenders who are actually trying to get their life back on track. They feel like the government's constantly pulling the rug out from under them. Our prosecutors, our DAs tell a victim, hey, this person's going to go away for 10 years. And then in 24 months, they get a letter saying, little Johnny's up for parole. Do you want to come to the meeting? And the victim's saying, wait a minute, I thought I had 10 years to think about this. So it's not fair to anybody. Now, should little Johnny have served 10 years for that particular crime? Probably not. We put it long on paper to try to look tough. The truth is somewhere in the middle, right? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on what the offense is.
Right.
So I think you'll see some right sizing of the adult sentencing code coming up next year. That'll be a big lift, but one that I think is long overdue. And also continue to enhance these programs. Again, as folks are coming out of prison, where they have a spot to land greatly dictates whether or not they're going to reoffend. Why do I care whether or not they reoffend? Because they're going to create a new victim. Yes. I don't want any new victims. So people say, well, why are you being so nice to those guys getting out of prison? Well, yeah, but look, if the softer landing, the better job they have, the better opportunity they have, the less likely they are to victimize my wife or my children when they're going down the road. So that's something I think we're going to see a big push next year. Of course, going into a re-election year, it's always interesting to see what folks decide to get tuned up about or not, or they'll put certain issues on the back burner. But I do think as far as the judiciary is concerned, it'll be that kind of truth in sentencing angle. And then overall, of course, again, the state's in fantastic shape, but we're going to continue looking at education. There are a lot of federal dollars being pumped down on the education side, also on the city and county and the infrastructure side. Congress, the federal Congress, is currently debating a massive infrastructure plan. There's money being pushed out of Washington that my great-grandchildren will not be able to pay back. But be that as it may, that is going to influence the type of legislation that comes forward next year as well.
Let's talk about this. I wanted to cover this because this law actually takes effect today, I believe.
It does.
The new
constitutional carry law.
Yeah, constitutional
That's
carry.
right.
Let's talk about that. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, again, it's kind of like medical cannabis. You ask 10 people, you get 20 answers.
Right.
What we did, excuse me, I keep bumping that mic. What we did in Tennessee was, people are surprised to hear the penalty for carrying a gun without a carry permit is a misdemeanor. It's like a parking ticket. Okay. That is not a huge deterrent to crime. In other words, bad guys do bad things with guns regardless of the law.
Exactly.
Good guys are responsible with guns regardless of the law because they're responsible human beings. So there was a push in the General Assembly to try to get rid of that misdemeanor. What I and others insisted upon, that we said, look, we've got an illegal gun trade problem in this state. We've got kids, especially in Memphis. It's kind of a gang initiation thing to try and steal guns from cars where people leave them unsecured and unlocked, which they shouldn't be doing. If you're a gun owner, you need to be responsible with that gun. And so what we did was we took kind of this wish list that we've all had for a number of years of things that would have cost a ton of money, like treating the theft of a firearm differently than the theft of a normal object is in this bill. So, for example, if I steal a TV that has the same value as a gun, it's graded as the same type of theft. That's inappropriate to me. The handgun that I carry is 30 years old. It is not worth anything. If I took it to a pawn shop, they would laugh me out of the room, but it is deadly.
Right.
So stealing that needs to be different than stealing an object of similar value. So we made stealing a gun a felony. And we're gonna hammer people. There's a mandatory minimum on the amount of time you've got to serve if you steal that gun. That is going to be a massive deterrent. At the same time, we removed that misdemeanor. So people say, oh my goodness, it's the Wild West. You can carry a gun. No, you still can't carry guns in places you couldn't carry them before. You're not able to walk into your kid's school with a gun on your hip.
Right.
You're not going to be able to go in places where it's posted private property, no guns. We had a lot of business owners over in East Nashville contact us. I own a nail salon, and I don't want people carrying guns in my store. And now everybody's going to have a gun, and I don't feel safe, and I'm going to close it down. No, ma'am. You put that sign on your door. That is your private property. The General Assembly is not violating your private property rights. Vanderbilt University, school campuses, they can still post if they want to. In public buildings several years ago, we did pass a law that said if you're going to post and say no firearms, then you've got to protect, the state of Tennessee has an obligation to protect the citizens inside that building. So if you're going to post in a public building, say no firearms, you've got to go through a metal detector like you do at the airport. Do I actually have a gun on me? You've got to have armed folks there to protect people. If some crazy person came and tried to do something there, you've got to have a law enforcement presence there to make sure that those folks are protected.
Right.
So to me, this bill really did a lot more tightening than it did loosening. All the focus is on that removal of that misdemeanor. The bill went on for pages and pages and pages to levy very, very stiff penalties on people who misbehave with guns. So it was really kind of a wish list of even, my good friends on the left a lot of times who wanted to levy penalties on people who do things with guns. We just didn't have the money to do it in years past. This year we had the opportunity, remove that misdemeanor, but then absolutely hammer folks who do bad things with guns.
Okay, so now to carry a weapon in another state, then you have to have a carry permit.
That's right. And that's why we preserve that permit process. It's called reciprocity. So when my family and we take a family vacation and I'm on the road, long hours a night and so forth, 3 kids in the car, oftentimes I want to make sure I can protect myself. But before I leave, I pull up that reciprocity list. As a carry permit holder in Tennessee, I know, okay, when I cross the border into Kentucky, I'm good. They honor that. Cross the border into Ohio, I'm good. They honor that. I know if I get to Washington, D.C., I can't go in unless I put my gun in a locker somewhere and lock it up and come back and get it later. So you're able to look at that list and see where you can carry that gun, and they honor that permit in that state. That's why we did, a lot of folks said, well, get rid of the permit altogether. I don't want it because it's my constitutional right to carry a gun. I don't disagree that it's your constitutional right to carry a gun, but that permit allows you that reciprocity in that other state, which I think is very important.
Right. And one of the things I'm proud of, particularly here in the county, is the sheriff's department and the city also provides gun safety classes. Yes. And I think it's important if you want to carry a weapon and you're unfamiliar with that, then I really think it's imperative that those people reach out and take advantage of those classes that's offered by the county.
I totally agree. Nothing gives me more heartburn than when I see a friend of mine who's carrying. I'll say, "Oh, what are you carrying there?" I say, "Well, it's just 9mm. I've had it in my purse for 10 years and I've never used it." I'm like, "God, please leave it at home." I feel like part of my obligation as a responsible gun owner is to actually go spend some time at the range once a week, every other week, be comfortable with that weapon. If not, you probably don't have any business carrying it. Is it your constitutional right? Yes, but I've got a right to do a lot of things I don't do that I'm not very good at. Exactly. So, we just ask that people be responsible.
All right, one last thing. We got a few more minutes left. Okay. And I just came across this, and I wanted to just talk about it briefly. The bathroom bill law.
Yes.
All right. Explain that.
All right. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. There was a desire in the General Assembly to make sure that folks had sort of notice, okay? If you're in an establishment, a private establishment, that allows transgender or even just multiple members of the opposite sex to use the same multi-use restroom. Now, how many businesses are like that in the state of Tennessee? I have no idea. I've never been to a place that invited both boys and girls to use the same bathroom.
Right.
But to the extent that you have that, there's got to be given notice so that my mom doesn't walk into a bathroom thinking it's only women in there and then sees a man using the restroom. So the sign has to be placed on the door that says, "We allow members of the opposite sex to use this same common use bathroom or transgender people to use this bathroom." It only applies to multi-use restrooms. So there's been a lot of misunderstanding. We had calls coming in. Well, I was at, so-and-so's restaurant and they've got a bathroom that everybody can use. And I said, well, yeah, but is there one toilet in it? Yeah. When you lock the door when you go in? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about places that encourage really everybody to go in and use the same. Now, again, how many businesses are like that in the state of Tennessee? I have no idea. But that was the point of that law, was to give folks notice so that they didn't walk into a situation that they weren't prepared for.
Now, what about, because parents may want to know this, and there's been some discussion. I don't know if
on the education side, yeah, I may have described a different bill than you were asking about. So there was a different bill by Jason Zachary out of Cookeville that basically said if schools are making accommodations for transgender youth, they also need to make accommodations for non-transgender youth. In other words, allow there to be a dedicated bathroom just for the boys or just for the girls. Again, I think pretty much every school is doing that, but the idea was to tilt that scale to make sure that, hey, we're protecting our transgender youth. We need to be protecting all the rest of the youth with just as much vigor. So that was the way I read
What
that.
about the locker rooms? Have we addressed that?
Yeah. So what most schools are doing at the local level is they're making individual accommodations. So if they've got a student who says, "Look, I'm transgender," and what they're doing is they're giving them a private place to change and do those sorts of things. I don't serve on the education committee, so unfortunately I don't get to hear the debate, the weeks-long debate about a lot of these things that come through. I don't really see them until that final product hits my desk on the floor of the House. But that's my high-level understanding of both of those pieces of legislation that did pass this year.
Well, we're going to wrap it up. Promise me you'll come back, because we just kind of just touch the surface here.
Absolutely.
Some stuff I want to talk about.
Well, and again, I want to thank you for doing this. We've lost so many of our local media outlets. I'm a big history buff. In my attic, I've got all these old newspaper clippings that my grandparents had, and so forth. And you see all the great media that used to exist. I'm so glad that you're doing this now. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining our show today. I hope you got some information that you were really looking for. Please go to our website at www.thejeffebyshow.com, where we have T-shirts, we've got hats, we've got coffee mugs. And again, we are listener supported. So if we want to continue to get this content, we need a little help from you to be able to do that. Also, subscribe to our newsletter. And don't forget that next week we have Carrie Roberts on. We're going to have fun.
Absolutely.
So
I may come by and heckle him through the window.
Please do. All right. Thank you again. And remember, Jesus Christ is King. We hope you join us next week. And so long from Dixon downtown.
Thanks for listening to The Jeff Eby Show. Join us next Thursday morning at 11:30 for more conversation about everything Dixon County. And keep up to date at thejeffebyshow.com.